Instead of me fulfilling my prophecy, I have to start one. Instead of me carrying on the empire, I have to build one.
It simply does not hold that the white race should turn over to a group of people only removed from the jungle by a few hundred years.
I was raised to understand that you cannot know where you're going if you don't know where we've been.
There are many firsts and many stories that will be told for generations.
The first Negro in history to win a major tennis title.
Thurgood Marshall, the first of his race.
The first African-American woman to medal in an...
It is a long journey to this moment.
America, we have come so far, but there's so much more to do.
May 7, 1964, on a railway station platform in Manchester, England. An eager audience that includes Eric Clapton, Jeff Beck, and Keith Richards are on the verge of witnessing a virtuoso performance by gospel singer and guitarist Sister Rosetta Tharpe. The 48-year-old Sister Rosetta had been performing since the age of 6, but this is the first opportunity the crowd from England gets to witness her firsthand. Sister Rosetta had become a global sensation, but her most significant feat arguably creating the rock in roll.
Imagine seeing somebody do something that you had never seen before, and she did it so well. Chuck Berry, Elvis Presley, Little Richard, Bob Dylan. Look at what they did. Put them all together and visualize a little middle-aged black woman. That's why she's the mother of rock and roll. She did it first.
And it wasn't until I got to college that I took a history of rock and roll class, and there was this video of Sister Rosetta Tharpe. She was singing Up Above My Head, and you see this woman with this choir behind her. She's got this big voice. She's super charismatic, and then she's carrying this Gibson guitar and just rips into a solo. And I thought, this is the most amazing thing I've ever seen.
This morning, I talked to my auntie. My aunt is 89. I said, Aunt Louise, have you ever heard of a lady named Sister Rosetta Tharpe? Oh, Lord Jesus, that was one singing lady. Sure, Lord, she could sing and play that guitar. Oh, Jesus. That's what's wrong with the music in the church today. They ain't got no feeling, coming in there looking like they going to a party. But oh, Sister Rosetta, that was one singing sister.
And then I heard about Rosetta Tharpe, and I saw videos of her. And I thought, wow, how powerful she was, how free she was. I found out she started when she was about 6 years old in the church. So if you're on a platform of the innocence of a child, the exuberance of a child, and standing on the platform of spirituality, that God is with me, how could you not be fearless? And that's what I picked up from her.
Then why should I feel so discouraged? No, then why?
You know, she was taught that she was a gifted child, and she was taught very early on that that gift was to be used for the glory of God. In her performance, she often looked up, and that was clearly maybe a kind of reflection of her relationship with God.
That he watches over me.
Ain't you glad? Clap your hands.
The music of slaves, often referred to as Negro spirituals, had evolved into a new form of music by 1930, gospel music. This new genre of music helped African-American preachers spread the word of Christ, and it also became an avenue of talented singers and musicians to launch a career in music.
When Rosetta Tharpe got older, traveled what was called the Gospel Highway, so the circuit of tent meetings, revivals, churches, auditoriums, where people could play the new gospel music coming out of holiness and Pentecostal churches.
I think one thing that comes to mind with all musicians is figuring out, a style and a sound, and even figuring out how to get started. And I know for a lot of Black musicians, especially at that time, they usually started singing in church. They usually were in church choirs or church bands.
I really tend to think of that gospel highway, that performance circuit running mostly in the South, as a kind of space of musical development for her, where she would have developed her style. But I also think she had a kind of extroverted way of singing and performing that I really think came out of the necessity of the performer.
She did things with that electric guitar that they didn't even know could be done, that they had never seen before. And then the fact that she did it while she was singing gospel music, oh, it really just blew them away. She had skills.
One of the things I argue in the book is that the music that came out of Black Pentecostal churches in the 20s and 30s is an important root of rock and roll, not separate from it.
Sister Rosetta established herself as a star on the gospel music circuit. During her stint in Miami, Florida, white audiences began to take notice as well.
Rosetta Tharpe was developing a fairly broad radio audience in Miami that she was distinguishing herself. So white people, according to her, would come to the church to witness Rosetta Tharpe's performances.
Not only was Sister Rosetta drawing interest from fans, but she was also drawing the admiring eyes of a church preacher named Thomas Tharpe.
Let me tell you, when her mother took her and they were traveling trying to get the people to, come to the Lord, there was a pastor that was there too, and he kept watching her. Guess what he did? He married her. Now, I don't know if she was in love or not, but they were married. That marriage didn't last because her friend said that he believed that the man rules, and maybe he just wasn't ruling her the way she wanted to be ruled.
Now, that can be very challenging for an artist to, like I said, live a balanced life when you are trying to make your way in the world. From all that I've researched, had nothing to do with her loving this man. It was conducive to her career, politically for her in the church. So in that, the driving force seemed to be her career.
Rosetta Tharpe decided to make the leap from a Miami tabernacle to New York City. Going to New York, leaving the church, agreeing to perform on secular stages certainly would have been a way to get rid of a husband that she was no longer interested in being married to.
Once in New York, Sister Rosetta immediately made history, becoming the first gospel artist to sign with Decca Records. She immediately released a string of hits like Rock Me, That's All, My Man and I, and The Lonesome Road. It was the first time gospel music showed up in the race or R&B charts. Audiences were spellbound by her innovative guitar playing. When someone told Rosetta that she played like a man, her response was, "Can't no man play like me? I play better than a man."
The first things I noticed about Sister Rosetta Tharpe was just that she was this character. And not to say that she was any sort of false version of herself, but she just came to life on stage. She was super charismatic. She would smile at people. It was just a big performance. She'd rip out her guitar and just go through these solos that were huge and very unapologetic.
She never played the guitar like it was a backing instrument to her vocals. It was always a second voice. It always was kind of talking back to her. Many of the characteristics that we associate with rock and roll guitar playing, you see her innovating them in the 1940s with her playing.
In 1944, Sister Tharpe released the single Strange Things Happening Every Day. It's now recognized as one of the first recorded songs of rock and roll. Rosetta was not only winning over fans, she was influencing other musical acts with her style of play.
Young musicians like Elvis Presley, Johnny Cash, Jerry Lee Lewis, who grew up in a white Pentecostal church, and others would have heard her. And so when the $1 Million Quartet, that's Carl Perkins, Johnny Cash, Elvis Presley, and Jerry Lee Lewis, gathered at Sun Studio in Memphis to perform as the $1 Million Quartet, they warmed up with Rosetta Tharpe songs. They were part of the repertoire that generation of early rock and roll, if we want to call that, musicians knew.
Johnny Cash referred to her as his favorite singer and an inspiration. Sister Rosetta invited 14-year-old Little Richard on stage for his first performance. It was that experience that Little Richard says made him decide to be a singer and musician. And Chuck Berry described his career as one long Rosetta Tharpe impersonation. Sister Rosetta's role in creating and influencing rock and roll is indisputable. Sister Tharpe's musical diversity allowed her to play in both churches by day and clubs by night. Being a crossover artist came with some pushback from her more conservative gospel fans. They were turned off by her playing of secular music and suggestive lyrics.
My people were Pentecostal, so if they had seen me gyrating and singing just the way I did, they would have had a heart attack. So I can imagine when they saw Sister Rosetta, Lord Jesus, is that Sister Rosetta up there gyrating like that? I bet they were hurt to the bone. They felt like they had lost one of their own.
She was a gospel musician, but also a rock musician. Does that mean she plays the church circuit? Does that mean she plays the bars and the venues and the theaters? You know, there's a confusion sometimes of where to place people, and we still see that today sometimes.
Rosetta! Rosetta! It's 3 o'clock in the morning. Get upstairs and get in bed with me.
Another thing that I think is really important about Rosetta Tharpe is we have a lot of tragic stories about women, musicians, Black female musicians, in terms of their relationships with men. I don't think she was tragically defined ever by a man. And she never let herself really be defined by the men around her. And so I see that as a kind of resilience and independence, and she was trailblazing in that way as well.
Guess what? She was one of the first artists to have her own bus. She even had a bed in the bus, a couch and everything. They thought it was amazing. But you know what? It was necessary because she was a superstar, she was a woman, and she was Black. And do you know, she used to travel with some guys that she called my 4 little white boys. They were the Jordanaires. And after they would perform to a sold-out crowd, and it would be fantastic, the Jordanaires who worked for her 4 little white boys, could go right on in the restaurant and eat. She couldn't go in the restaurant and eat. Sometimes she would go to places and the people would be nice enough to tell her to sneak to the back door and they would give her something, but she would still have to eat in the bus.
Sister Rosetta's independent streak didn't mesh well with the racial stereotypes of the day. She was willing to confront injustices, even if it meant putting her career on the line.
Rosetta and the Rosettes were invited to appear on the Perry Como show. Former members of the Rosettes told me was that the producers came out and had bandanas for the young women to wear. And of course, not only had they spent a lot of money on their outfits, but they had spent a lot of money on their hair. And they were not going to let anyone put bandanas over their hair or be kind of placed into stereotypes. So the way that the story was told to me, so it kind of works on a lot of levels, is that Rosetta Tharpe, outraged for them, said to the producers, you know, my girls are not going to perform with bandanas on. So a kind of display of kind of joyful Black femininity on television, which you didn't get to see that often in the 1950s, but also a refusal of anything that could be perceived as demeaning, countrifying, or stereotypical, certainly having them cover their heads.
Sister Tharpe was both a pioneer and fan of gospel music. While attending a Mahalia Jackson concert in 1946, Sister Tharpe discovered a potential collaborator, singer Marie Knight.
So Rosetta first saw Marie Knight on stage at a gospel concert in Newark, New Jersey, which is where Marie Knight was from. And she immediately recognized something in Marie Knight's singing that she thought would go well with her own. So she approached Marie Knight after that concert and said, "You're coming with me on tour." Really, the way that Marie told the story, it was literally, a couple of days after she was approached, she joined Rosetta Tharpe. Marie played piano and sang, and Rosetta played, obviously, guitar and sang. I'm really drawn to the idea that of the kind of picture of Black female independence that they together made in the late 40s and early 50s, making their way on the road in a bus that Rosetta Tharpe owned, and making their music and bringing along others to make the music with them.
Legend says that they had a little relationship going on. Now, nobody knows for sure. All of this is speculation, but in the music industry, they say that there was really something serious. Unfortunately, when they were touring one time, because they were doing really well, Marie's home caught on fire and her family passed. And that was traumatizing for her. She said, "I can't do this anymore." And so she left Sister Rosetta to be by herself all over again. And so she went on and kept touring.
By the 1950s and 60s, the artists that Sister Rosetta influenced began to eclipse her in popularity and sales. As a result, her music sales dipped and financial troubles soon followed.
It was probably really frustrating not to get the credit that she deserved. And I think that probably happened toward the end of her career. But she loved the Lord, and God answers prayers. Because guess what happened before she died, before she got sick? One of her fans in England called her up to see if she would tour with him. And she said yes. And she went overseas. And these people overseas had only seen imitations of Black performers. And here now, they had a real live one in their face. And she became a big star again. And I remember seeing her one time where she was singing in the rain, playing that guitar, looking up to the Lord as she sang, audience full of white people. And she said, "I'll always love my British fans. Thank you so much." I like to think about when she felt good.
The revival of international interest was bittersweet for Sister Rosetta. She had opportunities to tour, but her diabetes escalated, and on October 9th, 1974, Sister Rosetta Tharpe died of a stroke. She was 58 years old.
And when Sister Rosetta, who thought she was going to go touring again, but she didn't make it, when she finally passed, guess who fixed her up? Marie. Had her looking like a queen. Her face, her hair, her outfit, she was beautiful. That sisterhood was there until the end. So I don't really know if they had that kind of relationship, but whatever they had was a powerful thing because it lasted until she left this world.
Sister Tharpe, the child prodigy who evolved to become an innovator and pioneer of gospel and rock and roll, received one of the highest accolades in music with her induction into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Sister Rosetta continues to be recognized as a musical force who is unlike any other.
Rosetta Tharpe is one of the artists that has influenced me and encouraged me and inspired me. I find as an artist, the more that I know about other artists who have gone through what I've gone through, it helps me to keep on keeping on. She's one of them. Just knowing when the road gets rough and you feel like, what am I doing? I'm not making a difference. I think back on those stories. I think back on how that artist persevered. And in the end, I'm seeing what they could not see as their ending. And it inspires me to continue, even though I don't know what my ending is, but to continue to work as hard as I do with their examples in front of me.
Sister Rosetta Tharpe is the mother of rock and roll. Nobody paid attention in the States when she passed. But now, that's why she is recognized as the mother of rock and roll, because all of them came and spoke up and said, I wouldn't be where I was without Sister Rosetta. They emulated her.
We have a problem with how we write history in America, and it's starting to change and it's starting to turn around. But a lot of times, people of color, and especially women in general, have not been written into history.
Yeah, it's important to be inclusive when looking back on history because so many times we see women and people of color as important actors, historical actors, who then get erased. But there's something about the culture that likes to locate creativity associated with popular music in the figure of a young white man. And I think that made it very difficult for Rosetta Tharpe to kind of have a place in the history books.
You know what? We got to have more love, more understanding every day.